Hash Hush and Circle Up.
Welcome to On, the Hash House Harrier podcast for interviews, history, and stories. I'm your host, Ra.
Today on the podcast, we're back in New Zealand with a hasher that has not been going that long, but this podcast is not just about old folks. We've got a hasher who's hashed extensively on at least 2 continents for a while, traveled around, and just fresh off the World Interhash in her home country. From down in New Zealand, welcome today on the podcast, Recycled Virgin. Hi, RV.
Kia ora. Hi from wet Wellington.
Let's introduce you by telling your hashing origin story. When, where, and how did you get to your first hash?
It was 2015, 9 years ago. It was Easter. I had set off for the Philippines after quitting yet another teaching job. And I traveled around. I had a 2-month visa, doing lots of sightseeing and scuba diving. I ended up in a place called Puerto, Galera, about 2 hours south of Manila. I'd done some diving and a little bit of exploring and stuff. And I read in the Lonely Planet, because I don't travel with a smartphone. I just had a Nokia like 320 and the Lonely Planet. So everything was old school. And it said on Saturdays, there is a group that goes for a run. The Hash House Harriers meet at, I think, Captain Cook's at 2 p.m. And you're going to go for a run. I just went down there in a pair of shorts and a singlet, no water, no money, just running shoes, expecting it to be like a 5K fun run. I told the people who ran the hostel, I'm going to go down and do this run. And they said, oh, they actually ran past here last Saturday. So I thought, well, that's good because this hostel's on a really steep hill. So if it comes past the house, I'll just stay. So anyway, I walked down, I turned up and there was some guy, maybe like Finnish or Scandinavian, and he had a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet and he was, what's your name and where are you from? He was like typing it into the laptop. And they said, do you have such and such pesos? I had no money with me. I said, oh, no. And then they gave me a T-shirt and that was confusing. And then they loaded us up onto these big jeepneys. And if you've been to the Philippines, like a jeepney's like a really long American school bus with usually a few chickens and bags and rice and stuff on the top. There was about 30 people. We loaded into 2 jeepneys. I got in and started talking to these people. I seemed to be the youngest person there by about 30 years. They said to me after about 20 minutes in the Jeep, so are you running? Yep. So they slammed on the brakes, opened the doors, and the runners get out. And I thought everybody was getting out, but only like 7 people got out of the jeepney. And then they just ran off straight up a mountain jungle thing. And they didn't actually tell me that we were following any marks.
No.
They just ran off. I was like, oh shit, these old guys like in their 70s are fast. And it was about very humid. So I tried to keep up going up the hills. And then there was no keeping up anymore. They were just gone. There was a big water buffalo and we ran through a village where people were living in small bamboo-y kind of. The kids there had taken the trail marks and turned them all around the other way. So I was lost in this local people village for a little bit. And then somehow somebody was yelling on. So I didn't really know what that was, but quickly ran that way out of the village and then kept on. There were some amazing views and stuff like that. Then I got behind again because everybody sped up as they went downhill. I was taking it quite tentatively down the hill. Then I got to the flat and I kept running and people were like yelling at me like on in. I was like, I don't know what that means. So I like kept running and then they physically ran out of a bar and got me and pulled me into the bar where everybody was getting served chicken wings. That was quite good because I was really thirsty and hungry at this point because, I don't know, it had been more than an hour, like possibly an hour and a half. So yeah, I got dragged in and I must have been the last person to arrive because it seemed like people had been eating chicken and drinks for a long time. So the circle started immediately and they pulled me up the front with these 2 other people from Korea. asked me where I was from and how did I get here, and to sing a song from my country. And at this point, I still did not know what was going on. Luckily, the Korean guy, they asked him like what he did for a job, and something like corn fluffer or something. So people were in absolute stitches. And then they gave us a whole beer, an SMB, which is the beer in the Philippines. There was me, a young Korean girl, and this guy, and we had to scull the whole beer. They said because I finished first, I didn't have to sing a song. Somebody else would sing one for me because I'm not a very good singer. All I could think, I was like, I don't know the national anthem of New Zealand, like right now at this point of dehydration. So that all happened very quickly. I think they asked me like, what are you doing here? Like, why are you in the Philippines? And I was like, oh, diving. And then of course they always say like muff diving or scuba diving. And I said scuba diving, but Puerto Galera is quite the capital of muff diving in the Philippines. There aren't many young females in that particular area who are not working in the girly bars and stuff. I think after the chicken, they put us back in the jeepneys and I talked to some more people and they said, are you going to be here next week? Because if you come next week, we'll give you a name. I thought, I'm not going to be here next week, but that's interesting. And I was thinking, oh, I'd really like to be called Crazy Horse because the beer in the Philippines is called Crazy Horse or Crazy something. Oh, that'd be a good hash name. And they were like, oh, you don't know if it works like that. So we went back to where we started. They said, these are chili bins of beer. We're just going to go to the back of the dive shop and we're just going to finish these cooler boxes of beer. And I was like, oh, that sounds like a good idea. So I went to the dive shop and we finished all the hash beer. Then they said, you still owe us like whatever the pesos is. Let's say it's 200 pesos. And I was like, okay, I have some pesos at the hostel. They said, oh, jump on the back of this guy's motorbike. So we go all the way up the steep hill back to the hostel, get the pesos, get back down. So I quickly got changed at this point as well, because it's now about 9 p.m. and I'm still in the running gear. So I whipped on like a mini and the new hash top that they gave me, which was the only clean thing I had, put that on, then went back down. And then we proceeded to do like a pub crawl through all of Sabang. And then that went okay until there was a miscommunication where the local girls thought that I was encroaching on their business. Then some girls started like pulling my hair on the dance floor. At that point, we're like, maybe this isn't really this particular bar is not really gonna work. We ended up going to some other bars and they're all down little side alleys behind the dive shops and stuff. After that, got back on the back of some other motorbike and got back home at, I don't know, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning.
So like a first hash like most people had.
And I still didn't know what had happened. So yeah, that was like the first hash. And I did actually come back to Puerto Galera a couple of weeks later to do a second hash, which I did. And it was not as crazy as that, but it was still really fun. But obviously they didn't name me.
Did they tell you about it being outside of the Philippines?
They didn't tell me anything about it. I then went up to lots of other places in the Philippines. I started in Manila over Easter and it was at the beginning of my trip. So I still had a month and a half to go. And I didn't know that there were any other hash clubs in the Philippines, but I had heard of the Hash House Harriers once when I was little, when we were going for a run in Fiji on holiday. And Dad just said while we were running on some island, oh, I wonder if the Hash House Harriers have been here before. And then that was like a comment and I didn't know what he meant. So I had heard the word, but I didn't know what it was. And it wasn't in the rest of the Lonely Planet. For all the other places I went to in the Philippines, it wasn't in the Lonely Planet. And because I didn't have a smartphone or the internet, I didn't realize.
Where'd you go next and where'd you find the hash next?
Then 2 months visa finished. And if you want to get a visa to the Philippines, you must have a return ticket out. And you never know where you're going to fly out of. But I'm one of those people that if I book the ticket, I'm not buying another ticket. So I booked the out ticket from Cebu to Singapore on AirAsia for, I don't know, $50 or something. So I turned up in Singapore. I think I was just staying one night. I arrived on a Saturday and there was a computer in the hostel. I looked up hash house harriers in Singapore and found a Facebook page for Lion City. It had the details for where the run was. I worked out how to get there by the bus and I set off this time with some money and water and running gear. And this hash said that you have to bring clothes to wear after the run. So I had taken a little backpack with my Puerto Galera t-shirt, another mini skirt, and some flip-flops. So I went off to this run. I was running late, but luckily there were hashes on the bus. When I got off the bus, someone said to me, on. I still didn't really know what that was, but they had really high, bright socks on. So they said to me, come, you're going to the hash. And I said, yeah. So they said, come with us. So then we quickly ran to the hash, which was already running off through some botanical gardens in Singapore. That run was quite good. It was flat. It was hot. It was all through boardwalks. I understood more what was going on at this point. There was trail and people were calling. And we came back to the cars and it was dark and they made everybody shower before going into the circle. They had a portable shower in the back, like a camping shower. Everybody was standing there showering and stuff. The boys were down one end, the girls were down there, and it was pitch black. You couldn't see anything. They said, oh, you got to get changed. So I put on the mini skirt and the pink Puerto Galera t-shirt and the flip-flops. And then they did the circle. And the Philippines, they're just giving beer away. People are throwing it on their heads because it's not worth any money. But in Singapore, they're very careful with the beer. They are not tipping it on your head and stuff like that. I didn't really realize it's just more expensive in Singapore. The person who laid the trail, it was their first time laying trail. The GM had been appointed the week before for the RA. And so he said, are there any virgins? The virgin here dragged me into the circle because she was getting fined for being the hare and she wanted somebody else to be fined. She tried to pull me into the circle and I said, oh, I'm not a virgin, like not technically anyway. I was standing next to the GM when that happened. So he said, no, we'll deal with you later. So I stepped back out of the circle and I thought, oh, I'm safe. Then he decided he was going to name me. And so there was about 40 people there. They didn't know me. They didn't ask me any questions. They didn't ask me what my name was or where I was from or where I came from or anything. They just came up with, anyone got any suggestions for this person? And someone put up their hand and this guy was like Swedish or something. And he was called Euro. And he said, I think we should call her Kiwi Trash because then every time someone with the last name Trash drinks, she'll be in the trash family. And so I want her to be in the trash family. I was like, okay. Then there was another suggestion. I can't even remember what it was. And then the GM goes, well, what about recycled virgin? And then they had a vote. And Kiwi Trash got quite a few claps. The other one got nothing. And then recycled virgin, everyone was like, yep, in agreement.
Landslide.
This is what it's going to be. And then they said, come into the circle. And I'd only seen what happens in the Philippines on my 2 hashes. I took off my flip-flop, put them on the ground. Then I knelt down in front of the GM with my knees on the flip-flops. And then I took my top off, my Puerto Galera top, and I'm in my sports bra and my mini skirt in the pitch black. And they were like, what are you doing? And I was like, you guys are going to tip beer all over my head and throw flour all through my hair. And this is the only clean item of clothing I have because everything else is all sweaty. And the crowd was going wild. Like when I took the top off, like people just started losing their shit. And yeah, like at that point, then the GM was like, okay, we're like being knighted. You are now a recycled virgin. And there was like no beer or flour or anything. Then we went out to a restaurant somewhere in, I guess, Chinatown and had like more beers and dinner and stuff like that. And then I never made it back to the hostel. Then the metro had finished and I ended up staying at the GM's house. Then he explained what the hash was. So
Yeah.
then he was an Irish guy. I don't know what his name is, but I think he's probably still the RA or the GM of Lion City. And then he explained, oh, blah, blah, blah. Then I had to go back to the hostel the next day because I was flying out to Sri Lanka. And so I thought that was a waste of money. I didn't even sleep in the bed in the hostel. My bag never even, I could have just left it in the common area and just not even paid for accommodation. So yeah, I got back there and then it was time to check out because it was like 10 a.m. Then I had to go to the airport later that night. And because I was being cheap, I had booked a flight to Colombo from Kuala Lumpur and I was in Singapore. So I got on a bus, like a night bus that left at 11 p.m. or something. So I had this whole day being hungover in the hostel with like nowhere to go with this bag that I then had to get back up to KL and then get my ridiculously cheap flight for another $60 to Colombo in Sri Lanka. I decided that when I got to Colombo that I would definitely go to the hash. I did some traveling around and I went to the hash in Colombo and I think I can't even remember if it must have been a Saturday. And so, yeah, my fourth hash run was in Sri Lanka. And I thought it was a good idea to this time tell the hostel that I'm going for a hash run and I'm probably not going to come back tonight. I was in a dorm. I was like, does anybody want to go for a run? We probably won't come back tonight. So if we go for this run, I can't promise you that we're going to come back home. This one girl who's 19 from Belgium, she was like, yeah, I want to go running. And I was like, okay, I'm leaving in 20 minutes. She put on some shorts and we left. And I thought, oh, we can get there by public transport. No, we got out in the middle of nowhere and then someone convinced us to get off the bus and to drive us there. Then they thought we were going to like a running club, like a proper athletics club on Google. And I was like, no, we're just going to a patch of grass. Just keep driving. I'll know them when I see them. And then I saw a bunch of people that looked like hashers and we got there, but everybody had left on the run. And so we quickly left our bags with a driver and then ran off and caught the pack. And yeah, that one was also, we got lost in the dark in some kind of like rice fields with wild dogs chasing us and stuff. But when we got back for that circle, it was really cool. They had a van, their own personal van, which had all the beer in it. It had the big block of ice in the middle and they had little meals already pre-packaged and catered and stuff. That's all very exciting. We're like eating the food and drinking the beer and the 19-year-old from Belgium is having like a great time. And then the circle started. I thought, oh, I better explain to her what's about to happen because her English was like Europeans when they're 19, they've learned English at school. But what was going on in the circle was quite difficult to translate. While the RA was like saying stuff, I was paraphrasing it to her, like what's actually happening. But then they were like, you're talking in the circle. So then they just put me on the ice in the middle for, I think, the rest of the circle. And then she had no idea what was going on. And they asked her what her name was. And I was like, oh, this is going to be a problem because her name was Fanny. And I said, yeah. Then they go, what's your real name? And she was like, my name is Fanny. And she's like, only 19. Then we finished the circle and we got taken to the GM's car where he just had a bootload of clothes, like Colombo t-shirts, all sorts of stuff. So I got a t-shirt and she got a t-shirt. Then they said, okay, we're going to a beach club on the waterfront. You guys should come. And we're like, okay. So they drove us back to the hostel so we could get changed out of our hash gear. So we put on like going out clothes and the driver waited. We got changed. So then we get back in this big black SUV thing and we get taken to this really nice beach club on the water. And so we're all like dancing and having a great time. And then I think the beach club must close. And then the GM is this guy called Clitoria, who's a South African guy who was living in Sri Lanka doing World Bank stuff or whatever. After the beach club finishes, we go back to his house, me and this 19-year-old girl, and there's no furniture in the house. Like, he's moving out. I discovered that there was quite a lot of food in the fridge, and I was really hungry at this point. He's like, oh, that food's been there for a week or whatever. And I'm like, I don't really care. I'm just like eating all this potato salad. And at that point, I was like, what is going to happen now? Because she's gone upstairs with him and I'm in the kitchen and there's no furniture. So I found this big South African flag and I thought I'll use that as a blanket. So then I wrapped up into the South African flag, and then the driver, who somehow was still there, was downstairs as well. Then in the morning, the driver was like, I'll take you back to the hostel. And I was like, but what about the Belgium girl? And he's like, oh, don't worry about that. So anyway, I go back to the hostel and then I have to tell the Belgium girl's friend, oh, I left her at some guy's house somewhere in Colombo. And I was like, oh no, this is bad. So I was like, oh yeah, she's going to come back later. Then I just stayed in the hostel on the hostel computer thinking, oh my God, like I don't even know where she is. Then she comes back at about 6 p.m. in a pair of hash shorts that have got big like footprints on the butt.
Handprint.
Yeah. And then a big baggy hash. And I was like, are you okay? And she was like, yeah, I'm fine. And I'm like, okay. And
Your clothes.
and then I just like the next day, while she was like missing for a while, I wonder if there's any more like hash events I can go to. I just put into Google like Hash House Harriers, and it happened that the UK Nash Hash Early Bird Rego was closing in 2 hours. So I thought, I'm in Colombo right now and it's May. Could be May or June. I'm just gonna message my cousin in London and see if she can transfer £95 to this guy or this bank account, or seems like a good idea. Like, just do that. And then I'll put money into her New Zealand account. I just thought this will be really easy to do. So she was like, okay, I'm not going to ask any questions why I'm trapped this money, but she just did it. So I bought this 1-day pass to UK Nash Hash. And then I just traveled around Sri Lanka. Then I went to Indonesia to go out to Komodo to go scuba diving. But then that volcano erupted. I ended up getting stuck in Denpasar for a couple of days. And I thought, I want to do the hash, but I don't want to miss my flight out to Komodo. So in the end, I ended up just going and climbing Rinjani and running off that and quickly getting back. And every day you had to go to the airport and there was more ash. And so I never actually got to run with Bali because it looked like it always took 2 or so hours to get there by jeepney or truck and then getting back. And then I knew from my previous experiences that you'll never get home. Like, it's not going to happen. So I didn't
sure that everybody stays out all night on all their hashes, but okay.
Yeah, so that was what was happening. Like, Philippines, Singapore, and Sri Lanka were all like, there was a lot of partying going on and people happened to stay up all night. And I was like, that's all good. But yeah, when I got back from Komodo diving and stuff, I didn't hash in Indonesia at all. And I went back to New Zealand. And because I had this rego to UK Nash Hash, and I thought, I better do a run in New Zealand, because if I turn up to this event and I have a New Zealand accent, they're going to ask me, which hash club are you from? So I thought, okay. I got to New Zealand and I had a look and I discovered that there were 5 hash clubs in Wellington. 2 on a Monday, a Tuesday, a Wednesday, a Saturday morning, and a bike hash. And there was a website called Hash in Wellington that posted the places for all of the runs each week. It was all there. I saw that there was a run and it was going to be near my dad's house in Seatoon. I thought, that's good. I will go to that run, then I'll just stay the night at Dad's house. This was with the Wellington Hash House Harriers. And if you know anything about the Wellington Hash House Harriers, they're men only. So I decided that this will be a good idea. You can't tell from my hash name that I'm a girl, and you can't tell from my email address that I'm a girl. So I'm going to email them because it said visitors are welcome, but they must make contact before turning up. So I emailed them saying, hi, I'm interested in coming to your run. I'm Recycled Virgin. And they were like, okay, it's at 6:30 at the Seatoon RSA. And I'm very familiar with that area because I grew up there. So I went to Dad's house and I said to Dad, I'm just going out for a run. So I ran off in my pink Puerto Galera t-shirt and my running shorts and my,
You knew it was all men.
yeah, and my pink running shoes. And it was raining. I didn't take a jacket or a head torch or anything. It was winter in Wellington. It was cold. I must have got there like bang on 6:30. So we left straight away. And it was all up through the hills, all up through the bush. And I was at every check I was on. And I was with the runners. So I was front running. And these guys had no idea who I was. It was all the tracks I used to run when I was training for cross country when I was at secondary school. So I knew the area and I had no worries about getting lost because I knew I could get myself back to the thing. Then as we were on the downhill, some of the hashes started talking to me about an hour into the run. And we got back to the venue and I decided that I didn't wear my glasses because it was raining and I didn't wear contacts. So when I got back to the venue, I thought there were some other women there because there were people with long hair there. They said, oh, do you want a beer? And I was like, oh, okay. So I had a beer and then they said, oh, if you want fish and chips, put in $10 or something. And I was like, oh, no, it's okay. I won't have fish and chips because I didn't have $10. So they started the circle there and then they were like, okay, we have a visitor, Recycled Virgin. So down. And then they're, oh, you're wearing a pink shirt. Oh, another down. Oh, you're a girl. Another down. You've got new shoes. And I was like, no, I don't. These are not new shoes. Then there was a bit of an argument over the new shoes. So I'd been there like not very long, had 5 downs in the span of 90 seconds. And then I left. I didn't stay for the on after. I didn't really know. A few people talked to me, but most people kept their distance. And one guy who did talk to me was a guy called Oggy. He must have been the GM or something, but it turns out he was a teacher as well. So we started talking about teaching and then some other people came over and talked to me and stuff. And who's this person and where'd she come from? I didn't do any more runs in Wellington. I went over to UK Nash Hash.
And then you're
And
going to tell them, where's your home hash? Oh, I'm in the men's hash in Wellington. Yeah.
yeah, my mother hashes Puerto Galera. But I thought I'd done the Wellington Hash House Harriers. So surely that's the oldest hash in Wellington. So I was like, okay, everyone will know what Wellington Hash House Harriers is. Yeah, at least I will have done like one run in Wellington. So that's good. So when I went to UK Nash Hash, it was like a 24-hour flight from Wellington, LA, 2-hour layover there, LA Heathrow, and then got off in Heathrow with just carry-on luggage. Because I was going to go to the Rugby World Cup and my friend was getting married and my dad was going to have his 60th in Cuba. The whole going to UK Nash Hash really put pressure on the trip because the staff travel tickets are only valid for exactly 90 days. So like I needed to get to the UK the day that UK Nash Hash started because then I needed to fly out from Los Angeles to get back to Wellington. I also decided that I'd do the half marathon in Havana, the Marabana. So it was all timed that like once I would leave Cuba and then fly back to Mexico City or Cancun and then back, and then I'll get back to New Zealand and then the ticket would expire like the day before getting back home. So the UK Nash Hash thing, I had to arrive that day. So I got off the plane at Heathrow with my carry-on luggage. I just got a bus straight to Oxford. Then I walked from the Oxford bus station with my carry-on luggage to the venue. Then I didn't realize I had booked the dorm room, but I didn't have a sleeping bag or anything. So when I got there, they were like, took me up to the dorm and it was just a big open air, like old hospital from like the 1950s. And this guy, I think his name is Teeny from Birmingham Hash House Harriers or Bull Moon or something. He was like, I'll go around and find you a sleeping bag. So he went and asked a whole bunch of people if they had a sleeping bag and he procured one from somewhere. So I immediately went to bed because it was now about 3 o'clock in the afternoon after this 24 hours of flying. Then there were some other people that were like, hey, you're going to bed. Do you want to join our cuddle puddle? And I was like, I don't even know what you're talking about. The people who said that was cockatool and a bunch of young people that I had actually never seen at any of the hash events I'd gone
Right.
to. The 4 runs that I had gone to, I had never seen anyone like under the age of 30. And then there just happened to be this young group and they were all like cuddled together. And I was like, whatever, I just passed out. I woke up at 3 a.m. Obviously, I had missed the opening night of the UK Nash Hash. And so I come down at 3 a.m. and the people that are at an event sitting around at 3 a.m. drinking are a certain kind of people. So I hang out with those people and I had signed up to do the ball breaker. Breakfast was going to be served at 9 or 8 or something. So anyway, so 3 a.m. So at 6 a.m. I thought, oh, I better go to bed. So I had 1 or 2 beers and then I went to bed at 6 a.m. and then I got up at 8 a.m. and had the breakfast and did the ball breaker and got lost on that and came to the piss stop last and there was no piss left. There was only whiskey and there was no water left and it was like 25 degrees. Then they said, oh, you got to do this like assault course before you can have anything of climbing cargo nets. And at this point, I was like, if there's no water, I don't even care. So I drank some whiskey because it was like the only liquid there. And we still had to run back to the venue. So I got back to the venue and I was like, okay, I'm really tired. I'm just going to have a nap. Then I woke up at 1 o'clock in the morning the next day and it was an Alice in Wonderland themed event. And so there were all these people like Mad Hatter's Tea Party, like amazing stuff. But I'd just come with carry-on luggage. So I decided that I was going to be the rabbit from Alice in Wonderland. So I had bought these rabbit ears and a rabbit pomtail, and I put on some pajama bottoms, boxer shorts over some black leggings and a black top because I really did not bring any clothes with me from New Zealand. And that was fun, but I felt like I didn't really like people went really full on with their costumes and stuff. And there was a band and everything. And then we just drank till, 6 o'clock in the morning. And I just had a 1-day rego. So I left at that point and got a bus to Cambridge. Then the next day, people were paying rounders and broke their legs and I guess party for the next night because then the next day was a public holiday. I did just 1 day. I just stayed the night, did the run, stayed the night, and then left the next morning and walked out of the venue. And at that
Without any broken limbs. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. The only other person that was on the same sleep cycle as me was Mavis, who had come from Perth and done the same thing, flown directly in, rented a car, flown right in. So he was always awake when I was awake. So that was good. So he had been living in Australia and I met some really cool people. So I met Stretch. It was none of those 3 o'clock in the morning people, Cockatool, a whole bunch of people that are quite prolific hashers, but they were all active at that time of the morning. So that was a very good, I was like, this event was super cool. There were heaps of runners. There was like food and accommodation. And I thought, this is really cool. I want to do this again. I did try and hash. That was the beginning of a 3-month trip. And I'd just gone Oxford, Cambridge within 48 hours. And then I needed to get up to Birmingham and Wolverhampton. And I was going all the way up to Newcastle for Rugby World Cup and all over the place. But I didn't manage to hash in any of those places apart from London. I ran with London City. And at that time, Run to Eat was the RA or the GM of London. And I think I ended up running with them twice because London was my base because I lived in London for a couple of years prior to that. And I was sleeping at the rowing club because the combination of the club had not changed since I used to row there. If I couldn't make it to my friends' places, I would just go sleep in the rowing club. And then in the morning, wake up and then vacate the premises kind of thing.
How did it hit you then? Now you figured out there actually are young people.
The thing is, the young people are concentrated in 2 places, London and certain states in the US. Then in between that, like in the Southern Hemisphere, there really isn't a young proportion of people. However, Wellington ladies on runs on a Wednesday night, they have a lot of people under 30. They are the offspring of hashers, and the offspring have brought along their university friends. Then they come and run every week. So there's a good runners pack in Wellington. I think there are like pockets of young people around the world, but I think there's the same young people traveling around to these events.
So that's a whirlwind with your first 10 trails in
Yeah, I
5
don't even think it's
countries.
10. I think it's only about 7 at that point.
At what point did you set a trail? Where were you long enough that you became a hare and got involved in mismanagement?
I came back to Wellington. It was still 2015. It was like the end of October or November. And that's when I started to try out the other clubs in Wellington. And I tried all of them. I used to go to hash every night of the week. I wasn't working. I was looking for a job and I was rowing. And rowing training finishes at about 6:30, 6:45. So I would just look at this Hash in Wellington website. If there was a run that was near to the rowing club, I would go from the rowing straight to the run. I got a bit of a bad reputation for just turning up for circle because sometimes rowing training would go longer. As the season starts, there's a lot of long sessions. And so you've already done like 50, 60 minutes on the erg. And then you don't get there for the start of the run. I would shortcut. Being from Wellington, I was really good at short, but also really good at just paying my $2 and turning up for the charges, and then always sitting there just having a meal or chatting with people, and then getting the bus home and then going. That was easy when I wasn't working because then the next morning I only had rowing, and then I'd come home and then you're just at home not really doing anything because you're not working.
Sounds like a
And
good life. Yeah.
yeah, I got more into it when I went to the Port Nicholson Geriatrics Christmas do. That was actually the first event I went to when I came back from Cuba. So I thought, oh, I'm trying the second hash Christmas do. That'll be fun. They'll party all night. No. So it was
They're not
at
called
a school.
geriatrics for anything.
Yeah, it was at a school. It was all organized by Oggy, who was the guy that I'd met at the Wellington Hash, and he worked at Onslow College. And it was really nicely catered. I think we met at the train station and we got put on the train, and then we went to this, and then there were shuttles. I turned up there and I was the youngest person by 20 years, but I met Fire and DT, and they said, oh, where are you and where'd you come from and blah, blah, blah. And then DT was like, are you doing anything over Christmas? And I was like, oh, my friend from Switzerland's coming to stay. He goes, would you be interested in house sitting our place and feeding the cats? And I was like, I didn't really need to go to another house because I was in Mount Victoria, which is like central Wellington. But I was like, oh, whatever. Yeah, sure. And I stayed at their house, and my friend Ingo from Switzerland, he was in the Philippines with me and Sri Lanka with me, but he doesn't drink. So he never came to the hash because he didn't like running. But he was there when I started hashing, but he just never came along. He and I moved into Fire and DTs, and then I saw all of the hash paraphernalia, like all of the mugs and the T-shirts and the cups. And DT was like, help yourself to any of the alcohol or anything in the fridge. But we didn't really touch the alcohol. We just ate all the ice cream. Yeah, there was a lot of ice cream, so we ate all that. And we got to use his car. So we were driving around Wellington in DT's car that says like DTWH3 on the back and these big on stickers. And a lot of the time Ingo was driving on the wrong side of the road because he's from Switzerland and I don't drive. So yeah, that was interesting. But we turned up at the hash on Boxing Day and everybody was like, is DT here? What's
His
happening?
car's here.
Yeah, so Ingo had dropped me off and come to pick me up from the hash in DT's car. And that like really confused people. So this was now a different hash club. I think it was Wellington Ladies. And yeah, the people were just like, what? Who are you guys? And why have you got DT's car? So I think that DT and Fire were like a big influence. Fire was the GM of Capital. So she was organizing Christmas runs and fancy dress for Halloween and stuff like that. And Nokia, who was another girl who's maybe 1 or 2 years younger than me, she and Fire were RAing and GM together. So I started probably preferring to hash with Capital because, yeah, it was quite female dominant, I think. And the guys were super low key. It was always in town. You didn't have to go far away. It's likely that was the first club that I became involved like in doing stuff because,
Management.
yeah,
And how
like
much were
anyone
you
can make a
herring?
swing.
How much were you herring?
I don't know when I first set my first trail. Capital's only like 10 people and we hash every Monday. So it isn't long before you need to set a run. It's 10 weeks. And it was never one of the situations like, I will teach you how to hear. It was like, can you hear? Where do you want to do it from? Here's the dribble dropper. Go sort it out yourself.
Knock yourself out, yeah.
So I don't actually remember the first run I set, but it would have been for Capital.
Do you remember thinking about running a circle as RA? You did it.
Capital lends itself to that because we have 3 traditional charges at the beginning of every circle. So we have obviously the hair, then we have the FRB hat. It's like a yellow velveteen cap with a big penis and then 2 pom-poms on the back. We have the short cutting bastard hat, which was a hat from Indonesia into hash from years ago. And we have the wanker pants. The wanker pants are a pair of like brightly colored board shorts with a velveteen penis with 2 gloves holding the front. And Capital used to have this tradition where everybody had their own wanker pants. When you did a run, you would all sew your own brightly colored pants and you would wear them. But now there's only 1 pair of wanker pants left.
Oh my. Yeah.
So we have this charge. So obviously the FRB, the short cutting bastards and the hair are quite self-explanatory. But the wanker pants is for the person who was the biggest wank on trail. If you get one of these awards, you give it out the next week. So the
Okay.
first run I did with Capital, they gave me the FRB hat. This is a ploy because if you give someone the hat, they have to come next week. So that's exactly what I did. So like I was FRBing and they gave me this hat and then they said, you have to come next week. So the next week, the run was from like the Seatoon RSA or something, which was where my first Wellington run was. You have to think who you're going to give the hat to for a reason. So you already have to give out a fine. And it was easy for me to give out fines because I've got a very good memory and I can think quite quickly on my feet. Fire would always run like a pretty entertaining circle anyway. And so when the RA or the GM is not there, anyone in Capital runs the circle. There's not a set like person.
Yes.
So I think I just saw lots of people running the circle.
Yeah, that's cool.
And so, yeah, that position is not held by any one person. Like the Capital mismanagement, if there's only 10 of us hashing, if one person had to be hash cash, G has been on set for 30 years. It's like his address that's there. And Handle was hash cash for 20 years. Then they don't have GMs, they have 2 JMs. And the rule with the JMs is both of them have to pretty much never be around. Either they're leaving the country or they don't even live in Wellington. So they just make them the JMs. Then the baby Atola, that is supposed to be the RA. If the JMs aren't there, then the actual Atola is Mad Max of No Fixed Abode, who I think is living very close to where we did Nash Hash in Kaitsuri. But yeah, so the Capital mismanagement is not really management. It's very fluid. We don't have meetings. Some people go to AA, but that's on the same note as Hash. So no, there's definitely a bank account, and the signatories on that bank account are like people that have been with the club for 20 years and stuff. So
Yeah, that's a long surviving club, even that with that small group.
yeah, since 1981. And there's
Wow.
the dark days of Capital that people talk about where they didn't leave the pub. And what was really funny last night is we had 2 hashes return to us from Switzerland, Jock Sniffer and Hunky Dory. And Lickham was there last night as well. And the funny thing is Lickham actually knows Hunky Dory from Switzerland from years ago.
Oh, yeah.
So that was like a crazy kind of situation. But anyway, those 2 hashes are like, yeah, those days of Capital where we never left the pub, that was like the good times because she was working late and then would walk down and there would always be someone at the pub. And so
Wow.
that kind of like female hashes that are in the city that you're like, I don't want to go right home now, but there'll be some people there and they'll either be at the trail or they'll be coming back and they'll be there for ages. Like they're not just going to go home. They're going to wait until the pub kicks us out kind of thing. So I think it has attracted shift workers, particularly. Nokia was a nurse, BS who's in the trains and stuff, people who work odd days and stuff. So Capital was, I would say, like a bit of a misfit hash. There is no structure.
That's great.
It takes a lot of corralling the people to get them to Nash Hash and into Hash, but I think one of our big achievements was we got JJ, who's 88, to Nash Hash last year, and Fraggle, who's been hashing for ages but very low vision. And obviously BS and Nokia came over from Australia and Handle. We pretty much had the full crew together. We had Chips as well, but we were missing G-String. And G-String has been to like every Nash Hash, every Interhash, but he's finding it pretty tough mobility-wise, diabetes getting a bit of the best of him. So that was a shame. We were just missing G. But Interhash this year, we got a bit of it. We got Fraggle down to Interhash.
Wow.
That's probably a big achievement for us because we cannot get ourselves out of a paper bag. People that hash with Capital, you're like, how do they operate?
That's an introduction to recycled version. We'll be back with a bit of episode 2 to find out what she's done after that. I hope you enjoyed another episode of the On podcast. Hash your voices, hash your stories, hash your history. New episodes every week. Till next time, On, this is Ra.
To close the circle, here's the Hash Anthem sung by Mother Hash.
Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Sweet